Hello, my name is Mustafa Khalil. I am presenting about my paper, which is titled The Similarities of Sophocles' Antigone and Electra compared to Shakespeare's Hamlet. Those are the two pictures of Sophocles and Shakespeare, Sophocles to your left and Shakespeare to your right, as you probably already know. Both of them are very influential to the theater world and very influential to literature in general. First off, I'm going to start off by talking about Sophocles and the basic history of Sophocles. Um, Sophocles lived during the 5th century, where we don't have the exact date of when he was born and when he died, but we do know it's somewhere around 497, 496. That's when he was born, and he probably died sometime around 406, 405. Sophocles, like I said already, he is one of the most impactful and influential writers ever, especially in his time of Greek classics. And till today, his works have still survived. So that by itself should prove how impactful he has been. He is one of the three tragedians alongside Aeschylus and Euripides. For Sophocles' works, his most notable out of all his works is his trilogy, which is called the Theban Plays, which consists of Oedipus, Oedipus Apollonius, and Antigone. Let's move on to Shakespeare and a basic history of him. Everyone knows who Shakespeare is because of his work and because of what he has done. He lived through April 1564 until April 1616. He was born in 1564, of course, and died in 1616. He is one of the most impactful writers ever, and looked upon to be the most impactful English writer. I think that is not even arguable. His noticeable plays, it's hard to pick which plays are his notable ones because he has so many great ones. But Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, and King Lear. I will be talking about Hamlet and connecting it to Antigone also in a bit. So, these three pictures. As you can tell, if you look at them, you probably make out what these pictures are from. If you look to the real life picture, that is Kenneth Branagh. He is an actor, and that picture is of the movie that he was acting in, where he was playing Hamlet, and of course the notable figure of the skeleton head and his big monologue of to be or not to be. The top right picture is a painting of Antigone, where you can also see Antigone and Ismene and their dead brother Polynices. Now, the picture to your bottom right, this is actually from Electra, which is a play by Sophocles also, and I will be talking about that play alongside Antigone and Hamlet. But in this picture, you can see Electra holding a vase, and you can see her brother Orestes. So let's move on. Okay, now most of you might say, why would you want to make the connection between Hamlet and Antigone and Electra? I mean, what's the purpose behind it? Well, there is no proof that Shakespeare actually took ideas directly from Sophocles and credited Sophocles for influencing him. We don't know if that's the case. However, we can say that it might have been that Shakespeare was inspired by Sophocles, because through connections and similarities of the plays that we connect with, we can assume that Shakespeare was influenced by Sophocles. And also, why not? Why not make the connection? Well, Sophocles' impact as a writer made his works included in the classics, and because of that, in education and in schools, people tend to read Sophocles' work. And we know that in Shakespeare's education, what the school that he went to, the classics were provided as a source of reading, and so we know that Shakespeare probably read Sophocles' trilogy and his works alongside many Greek classics. So let's talk about the story of Antigone. I'll talk about it very briefly since we read it in class. So the story revolves around Antigone and King Creon. And the decision that King Creon makes, and he forbids the city or anyone from burying the dead body of Polynices, who is the brother of Antigone. And throughout the play and throughout the story as it unfolds, we find out that Antigone does bury Polynices, and King Creon tries to condemn her for it. And then later on, Antigone's actions would lead to the death of herself, Creon's son Hymen, and his wife Eurydice. The story of Electra, which was written by Sophocles and the two other Tradition writers, but we're going to focus on Sophocles' version. However, even though the story is very similar in all three. So the story goes that Agamemnon comes back from Troy. We learned that he had sacrificed his daughter before leaving Troy so he can have safe passage on his way back. And his wife, Clytemnestra, which I have a really hard time pronouncing, is frustrated with Agamemnon for sacrificing their daughter. So her, with her newly adopted lover, while Agamemnon was gone, whose name is Augustus, plan to kill Agamemnon for the vengeance of the daughter. So they end up doing that, and Agamemnon dies. So we come up with the story that Electra is weeping for her dead father, and she's seeking vengeance for the killers of her father, who are her mother and her new stepfather. And eventually Orestes, who is the brother of Electra, he comes back to the city after being banished several years ago, and he comes back, and him and Electra plan the killing of their mother. And the plan goes well, and they do end up killing their mother in vengeance of their father. Now let's move to the infamous story of Hamlet. Most of you probably know the story, so I won't go into too much detail of it. We know that in the story of Hamlet, from the beginning to the end, Hamlet is trying to avenge the death of his father, who has been murdered by the current king Claudius. Because Claudius wanted to take over the throne, and he ended up taking it over, and Claudius ended up marrying Hamlet's mother, Gertrude. Eventually, as the story goes along, the long 5 acts of the play goes along, Hamlet ends up killing Claudius and avenging his father. But, however, for him to do that, the deaths of Ophelia, Gertrude, Laertes, Polynices, and Hamlet himself had to occur so Hamlet can kill Claudius. It wasn't a sense of like he had to kill them to get to Claudius, but you know what I mean. Now let's talk about the similarities of the 3 plays. We see in the 3 plays a lot of family issues, a lot of family problems, saying it in a modern way. Family members fighting with each other, family members killing each other's, and that would eventually lead to their demise. We see in the 3 plays incestuous relationships. In Antigone, much more and more related inside the first family because of Oedipus. But in Electra, we also see Clytemnestra sleeping with the cousin of Agamemnon, and in Hamlet we see Gertrude sleeping with Claudius. Also, another similarity is the death of the family members. In the end of the plays, most of the family members die. In Hamlet, pretty much all of them die. In Electra, the death of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon. In Antigone dies, Orestes dies, sorry, not Orestes, Haman, and the mother of Haman dies also, leaving Creon to feel what he feels of the death of his family. I like to link Antigone with Hamlet. I see a similarity for the 2 characters. Hamlet, of course, is the protagonist of Hamlet, but I don't see Antigone as the protagonist. I don't link him in that way. Creon, for me, is the protagonist of Antigone. But for Antigone, the dead body of her brother is what drives her to go on and do her actions. And in Hamlet, he has the ghost of his dead father that drives him to do that and that and that. So I like to link them in that sense. And I like to link Orestes with Hamlet also because they are the sons who avenge the death of their father, and they end up killing to avenge their dead father. Also, in all 3 plays, you see that the families are the royal families, the kings and queens of the cities, which wasn't unfamiliar at all. I already talked about the pressures of the bodies, of course, of Polynices and the ghost, but I like to link those two, the actual body of Polynices and the ghost of Hamlet's father. I like to link them two. That's a big similarity also. Also, I like to link Creon with Claudius and Augustus with Claudius, even though Creon never wanted initially to be the king. He found himself being there. But for Augustus and Claudius, they wanted to take over the throne, and they killed to do so. But they were the three characters who were taken vengeance upon. And Creon, it wasn't in the same way, because Antigone buried her brother because she wanted to bury her brother, but he ended up getting the disadvantages and getting the consequences in the end for his law. Next, I would like to talk about the similar themes of both writers. We see in the writers' plays, not just in these three, but in any of their plays, we see very similar themes. We see the theme of betrayal between relationships. We see the theme of vengeance. We see the theme of families. We see the theme of murder and treachery, trying to take over the throne, and the scheming and plotting behind treachery. And we also see the theme of moral corruption. And those are, for me, the biggest themes that we can link between Sophocles and Shakespeare. To close off with, I'd just like to say, yeah, of course, we can see that there are much more similarities in Electra than there are in Antigone when it comes to Hamlet. But the similarities of Antigone are still there. And even though the story of Orestes and Electra are told by all the three tragedians, it's very important to look at Sophocles' version, because Sophocles is probably considered the most influential of the three writers in ancient Greek at that time. This is a side note, but there's this theory that Shakespeare probably never existed, or it was a group of people who wrote the plays, because this one person couldn't have written these plays. But it tends to make sense when you see that maybe this one individual was influenced by previous works, and with his own ideas he added on his touch to these stories, and he added on his own versions. The whole idea of the paper is that Shakespeare is influenced and could have been influenced by Sophocles' work. It's not connecting anything that Shakespeare stole ideas, and not. It's very obvious that Shakespeare had his own ideas, but this paper is about the influence of Sophocles upon Shakespeare, especially with the plays of Antigone and Electra, and the connections that could be made to Hamlet. Thank you for watching.